Imagine you're transported back to the time of World War II. It's the winter of 1944. For weeks, the frozen Ardennes forest had been a place of uneasy calm. Allied forces believed they were in a period of regrouping and consolidation, their thoughts drifting towards the approaching end of the war. But hidden among the snow-laden trees, the German High Command was preparing for a bold and desperate plan. One that would shatter the stillness of winter and plunge the front back into anarchy. This was no ordinary offensive. Adolf Hitler himself envisioned it as a turning point, a final, daring attempt to break the Allied advance, recapture lost territory, and force a negotiated peace. With meticulously laid plans, German forces prepared to drive through the Ardennes in a lightning assault, aiming to split the Allied armies and seize the crucial port of Antwerp. For the soldiers stationed on the front lines, the initial hours of the attack were nothing short of apocalyptic. Waves of tanks, artillery, and infantry overwhelmed unprepared units, creating massive bulge in the Allied lines. Communications were severed and defenses collapsed, and a bitter fight for survival began amidst the biting cold. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. On December 16th, just before dawn, the silence of the Ardennes forest was shattered by the deafening roar of artillery. Shells rained down on Allied positions, cutting off communications and throwing troops into chaos. For months, the German High Command had meticulously planned this attack, assembling over 200,000 troops, more than 1,000 tanks, and vast supplies of fuel and ammunition, all in secret. The offensive, codenamed Operation Watch on the Rhine, was a gamble born of desperation. Hitler believed that a decisive blow in the West could split the Allied forces, trap their armies, and force a negotiated peace. The stakes, in his eyes, were nothing less than the survival of the Third Reich. A victory here could allow him to focus his attention on the encroaching Russians in the east. The plan relied on three critical elements: total secrecy, lightning-fast advances, and weather. Heavy snow and dense forests masked the German buildup, allowing them to strike without warning. The attack was launched across an 85-mile front, with three armies converging in a massive assault. The northern thrust targeted the critical road network at Elsenborn Ridge, while the central forces aimed to siege Bastogne, a vital crossroads that can control the entire operation. To succeed, the Germans had to move quickly. Every hour counted, as delays could give the Allies time to regroup and counterattack. Hitler's generals knew that this was their last chance to turn the tide of the war, and they spared no effort in preparing what they called the greatest battle of annihilation. The early hours of the offensive were devastating. Entire Allied units, believing they were on the quiet sector of the front, were overwhelmed by waves of German infantry and tanks. Key towns and villages fell rapidly, and thousands of soldiers were captured or forced into retreat. The surprise was so complete that some Allied commanders initially believed it was a localized attack, not the beginning of a major operation. In just 2 days, the German advance created a massive bulge in the Allied lines, extending nearly 50 miles into Belgium. This wedge of territory gave the battle its name, the Battle of the Bulge. The speed and ferocity of the assault stunned the Allies and sent shockwaves through their command structure. Amidst the chaos, the Allies struggled to regain control. General Eisenhower and his staff worked tirelessly to organize reinforcements and stem the German advance. Units were rushed to the front, sometimes arriving in the middle of the fighting with little preparation. One of the most critical moments came at Bastogne, a small town that controlled several key roads in the Ardennes. The 101st Airborne Division, along with other units, was quickly dispatched to hold the town. Surrounded and outnumbered, they dug in for a desperate defense, enduring freezing temperatures, constant shelling, and dwindling supplies. Their resolve would become one of the most defining stories of the battle, if not the war. For the Allies, the initial days of the Battle of the Bulge were marked by chaos and uncertainty. The Germans had seized the initiative, creating a crisis that tested the limits of Allied leadership, strategy, and morale. But even as the front lines shifted and the odds seemed overwhelming, the seeds of resistance were already taking root. The battle was far from over, and the tides of war would soon begin to shift again. One of the most critical turning points of the battle was the defense of Bastogne. Encircled by German forces, the town became the focal point of the offensive. Bastonia's strategic position as a crossroads meant that holding it was essential for the Allies, and capturing was equally crucial for the Germans. The 101st Airborne Division, along with supporting units, found themselves surrounded, cut off from reinforcements and supplies. Despite relentless artillery bombardments and freezing conditions, the defenders held firm. Their resilience was epitomized by Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's now famous response to a German demand for surrender. His one-word reply, "nuts," not only captured the determination of the men at Bastogne, but also boosted morale across the Allied lines. Their stand brought precious time for the Allies, delaying the German advance and allowing reinforcements to organize and counterattack. Another crucial turning point came not from strategy, but from nature. The early days of the battle had been marked by heavy snow and overcast skies, grounding Allied air support and giving the Germans a huge advantage. However, on December 23rd, the weather began to clear. With the skies open, the Allies unleashed their air power. Fighter planes and bombers targeted German supply lines, destroying fuel depots and cutting off reinforcements. Transport planes dropped supplies to the beleaguered defenders of Bastogne and providing them with food, ammunition, and medical aid that they desperately needed. The return of Allied air dominance turned the tide, crippling the German offensive and forcing them onto the defensive. While the men of Bastogne held their ground, General George S. Patton and his Third Army were racing to the rescue. In one of the most remarkable feats of the war, Patton's forces executed a 90-degree turn, redeploying over 100,000 troops to relieve Bastogne. Moving through icy roads and harsh terrain, they pushed forward with relentless determination. On December 26th, Patton's tanks broke through the German lines and reached Bastogne, ending the siege. The sight of American tanks rolling into the town was a moment of triumph, not just for the defenders, but for the entire Allied effort. It marked the beginning of the German retreat and the collapse of their offensive. As the Allies regained their footing, the German offensive began to unravel. Their initial success had relied on speed and surprise, but as supply lines were cut and reinforcements failed to arrive, the momentum stalled. Without the fuel and ammunition to sustain their advance, German tanks were abandoned on the battlefield and their troops were forced to retreat. As the Battle of the Bulge came to an end in January of 1945, the German forces were shattered. Over 100,000 soldiers were lost and their ability to mount any meaningful resistance in the war was gone. Hitler's final gamble failed. For the Allies, the cost of victory was staggering. More than 80,000 casualties made this the bloodiest battle fought by American forces during the war. Towns and villages were left in ruins, and the forests of the Ardennes bore the scars of unimaginable sacrifice. But the Battle of the Bulge was more than a military turning point. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The failure of the offensive opened the path for the Allies to cross the Rhine and push into the very heart of Germany, bringing the war to an end just 5 months later. More than anything, the battle stands as a testament to the resilience and courage of those who fought off the last German offensive. Against impossible odds and in the harshest conditions, they held the line, proving that even in the darkest hours, determination and unity can prevail. Thank you for joining us in looking back and remembering the sacrifice of the men who fought and died nearly 80 years ago during the Battle of the Bulge. If you enjoyed this topic, giving us a like would really help. And if you're interested in other history topics like what ifs or historical mysteries, consider subscribing to see what we have coming in the future. If you have any ideas for future content or ways I can improve to make the viewing experience more enjoyable, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday season. See you in the next one.